You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, I am not Derek, but this is Alex, and I am Kevin. So our fearless leader had some family situations that he's trying to tend to tonight. So you're stuck with the two of us. So welcome to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Kevin and Alex style here tonight. Alex, how you doing, buddy?
It's like Dad gave us the keys to the vet, and we've got to bring it back in one piece, right? Like
that's right. Bring it back in one piece.
Just bring it back in one piece. We will do the show justice. As Derek, I believe this is the end of an Iron Man streak. This is like when Cal Ripken had to sit out after his however many games that was, 2,000 or whatever in a row. Yeah. There's been times where I've had to miss. There's been more than a handful of times where I've had to miss for work and other commitments or the air conditioning going out in my apartment. There's been times where, you've had to miss because of work or other commitments. But Derek has never had to miss a broadcast. And so we won't dwell on that fact, but we will do it justice, and we will get you guys up to speed as we are into now, 2 full weeks of preseason football has been completed. That means it's draft season. As a lot of, it's always draft season for you and Derek, Kevin, but it is draft season for all those redraft leagues. I know we were setting when we're going to do the home league draft, the eponymous name of the show here. So, we've been talking about that. We have to get our keepers set here soon, which that is a fun time as well in the home league. Figure out what draft penalty you're going to take based on, what guy you're going to take. That's a new rule this year, which is fun. And then of course all these other leagues that you are in. So how are your drafts going right now?
Most of my drafts are done now. Like, we have the home league. I have one for work. I am in the tail end of a guillotine league that I'm drafting in right now, which is, no big deal. I think I might do some best balls, just as we kind of keep rolling up towards it. But all the dynasty rookie drafts are done. Any new dynasty league that I decide to hop into and do a startup is done. And, anything where I don't know the group of people, right? And just kind of doing that. So for the most part, I'm squared away. Like, I feel pretty refined. I feel pretty tuned in with where I like guys and where I think they're going to go. Obviously, each draft is different. But I've been able to implement some different strategies this year. And it's been a lot of fun. I did a super flex 2 tight end premium, like 20 round draft earlier. And I was kind of towards the tail end. And I actually started a league going tight end because I was nice. The first tier quarterbacks had gone through. And with the tight end premium, I said, you know what, screw it. I'm going to take a run on this. And I was able to get Travis Kelce and then follow it up with Kyle Pitts. I think Andrews went in between us. But, just something to start different, right? Just to see how the draft shook out for me. I think the Superflex kind of helped me in that aspect, just because people are so heavy on quarterbacks there at the beginning. All the skill position players are left over. So then I'm able to kind of go quarterback, running back in the 3rd and 4th, or running back, quarterback, whatever it was, and then pick another quarterback up in like the 8th round or something like that. So it's fun, right? I mean, that's why we do this. But kind of speaking of tiers, as I was just mentioning to you, we're gonna go into some more positional rankings here today for you guys. What else are we talking about? We're doing that. I'm going to talk tiers here for a second. All tiers are so important. And then we're just going to see where this ship takes us, right? Because Dad's not here,
right?
Yeah,
no, we've got a rudder. We're going to get into those tiers. We've talked about it a lot on this show about tiers and tier breaks and how important it is about that. And Kevin, we'll get your thoughts on that. We've got our wide receiver rankings and the tiers that we have. We'll get through some of those. We'll get to our running back tiers as well. As we get, into draft season here. It's funny that you say that you're kind of wrapped up. I haven't done any of my drafts yet. So the only drafting I've done is with you guys with you and Derek. So I'm actually excited to get into draft season and filling out with I got a high school league that I'm in. Obviously, we've got the home league here, and so I'm very excited about when all of those shake out. I should probably pay attention to those group chats to figure out when those drafts are, because it's not a good idea to miss your draft. But
don't miss your draft. That's how you end up getting kickers and defenses in the first round. Uh-oh.
The streak lives.
Dad's back.
The streak lives.
Back. Hold on. Hide the beer. Hide the beer.
We filled
Dad's
out the
behind.
lineup card. We made the change. The streak lives on.
Now you see this. So
I see that. That is weird.
I heard the intro. Y'all were holding it down. Mom kind of came through and said, "Nope, rope," and said she's gonna rock and roll that one. So I'm back.
Shout out to moms
everywhere.
Well, you owe Mom some flowers and a
nice night on the town
that intentionally doesn't leave to anything else. So that's what you owe Mom.
There you go. Absolutely. So it's I'm excited. We got a great show tonight. This is gonna be a lot of fun.
We do have a great show. So let's get into it. Kevin, go ahead. We talk so much about tiers, and if you haven't heard why we talk so much about tiers, it is the best way to go about drafting. Kevin?
So a couple of years ago, I really started implementing this, and we talked about it last week a little bit when we were doing quarterbacks and tight ends, but just to kind of reiterate, I use tier-based drafting. So one thing it does is it helps me not fall into fandom and fall in love with one specific guy. And if that guy or player goes, I feel like my whole draft is blown up, right? We say this a lot on the show. You can't win your league in the first 2 rounds, but you can definitely lose it. Tiers is a good way to maintain, keep pace, stay in the hunt. So what it is you have these positional rankings, right? Whether you're looking at a top 300, whether you're looking at positional rankings 1 through 50, 1 through 75, whatever that is for your draft, obviously all positions, IDPs, whatever have you. But what the tier-based drafting does is you're basically grouping like players. So that way you kind of have an idea. If you really like player 1A, but Alex is sitting right in front of you, and because Alex pays attention to this show and is a student of the game, he's kind of thinking the same thing. So Alex takes player 1A, and now you're on the clock. You have 30 seconds to make your pick, or a minute, whatever that looks like, and it's there to help you maintain composure and be able to draft accordingly how you see fit, right? The tiers are not set in stone. Like, maybe tier 1, but I think even some of our tier 1 guys from last week, right? We just view them a little differently in how we break them down. But it helps you pivot smoothly from one player to another, or possibly one position group to another based off of where you're at in the draft, what your roster makeup is, all that good stuff. So it's a format that's built in, and all it does is it helps keep things aligned. So you're not fixated on Michael Pittman. You live in Indianapolis and you are a diehard Michael Pittman fan, and you are dead set that you're going to get him. He's going to be your wide receiver 2, and things are going to be just kosher. You're going to ride in, Matt Ryan's going to feed him the ball, and you're happy about it. Well, 2 picks in front of you, someone jumps the gun because he is a better Colts fan than you are, I guess, and decides to take Pittman. Well, now you have 2 choices. You can, kind of throw your hands up and pout and stress about what you're doing for the next minute or 2 until your turn to pick, or you just go back to your ranking sheet. Say, okay, Michael Pittman's gone, but what do I have? I have DJ Moore. I have maybe Deontay Johnson. Maybe I have Mike Evans in some leagues, right? People are getting kind of scared with the Tampa Bay offensive line, and he's starting to fall a little bit. Or you can pivot over, and maybe you look at running backs and go, okay, well, he's gone, but I could go J.K. Dobbins. right? Or I could go Breece Hall, or I could go who else am I thinking of, guys?
Kind of in that running back 15 range. I mean, there's a lot of options there. You've got some guys. Saquon would kind of be in that range. David Montgomery, those type of guys would be in that range, certainly there.
Yeah. I about said Gibson until this last week, right? And now Gibson's kind of fallen through the floor. So buyer beware on Gibson. Make sure you stay attuned to the news coming out of Commanders camp. I actually said that right. I didn't call him the other name.
Either of them.
Right.
So, I mean,
so that's what the tier-based is. It's not rocket science. So please don't overthink this. And it's not necessarily foolproof, right? There's no guarantee of health. There's no guarantee of, super high production from one or the other. But it's guys that I think are going to finish very close to each other to the point where it's not going to make a difference in final rankings.
Right.
So you can pivot off, and it also helps you establish when to jump in on a run, or maybe when to lay off of a run, or if you feel like you're kind of holding, an auction league term, you're holding the gavel, right? Maybe you have the turn, and you can kind of start a run and see if you can force players into reaching because they feel like the pool is drying up. Like it's a different way of looking at it. But I love tier-based drafting. If you have any questions, please let us know. Hit us up on Twitter. Obviously, comments here for the show. YouTube, the website, all the things at Good Old Boys FF. Hit us up. Let us know if you have questions. I'm more than happy to try and explain this better if it's not making sense, or to help differentiate players if you're having kind of a hard time saying, T. Higgins or Hollywood Brown. And not necessarily that they're in the same tier. T. Higgins is going about a round and a half, 2 rounds before Hollywood Brown, but something like that scenario.
Right. And one of my favorite things doing on the tier bases, right? We always talk about knowing your room and knowing the draft and knowing how some of that board is going to fall. And if you're using a tier based system, right, like you have the knowledge that these guys should go similar to each other as far as overall points finish. And so one of the things, and this is, call it mean or whatever, it is a accurate, it is definitely a way to draft and a strategy that you can employ in there. If you know that a guy drafting right after you or 2 picks after you would have their eye on this guy in that tier type of thing, go ahead and pull the trigger on him, and you'll see somebody else in your room kind of tilted, and you can influence the draft that way as well and help bring things around for you. So, example on this one, several years ago, Alex would have, if he missed out on Carson Wentz as his quarterback, like the entire draft would have been a bust for him in some of those cases, right? Like, but and everybody else in the home league knew that, and so some of these things were, some of these picks were made to try and see if they could get somebody to tilt with an example like that. So you can absolutely, if you know your room, use the tier base to even an advantage and play the player or play the manager of another team in your league. That way as well. So it goes even more so than just the players as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, Derek, I'm going to let you hit the buttons so I don't screw anything up with this necessarily. But let's jump on into this. Let's take a look at these wide receivers and where we have them ranked, and we can kind of show some of this tier-based rankings and drafting that we've been talking about. Perfect. Blow that baby up. All right. So, as you guys can see here, we have our consensus rankings off to the left, and just the generalized how we have them ranked as a group and the consensus rank that player has. And then as we get over here to the right, we've kind of started to highlight some things. Maybe we look at them a bit different, as you guys can see with the different colors. And what this is it's trying to simplify and visually explain our tier-based systems. So, Alex, if you don't mind kicking us off here, since you're kind of first on the list as we go left to right on the sheet, can you break down your tiers based off your wide receiver rankings for us?
Absolutely. So I seem to be a little bit more bullish than the two of you, but In my top tier of wide receiver, I have 4 guys. I have Cooper Kupp, not necessarily in this order. I have Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Davante Adams. And the reason why it's not necessarily in this order is because I honestly think that any one of those 4 could finish wide receiver 1 this year. And to me, it's negligible, the difference between getting one of those 4 guys. I think any one of those 4 has a real legitimate shot at being a number one, the number 1 overall receiver. I think it's going to be Justin Jefferson, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's Jamar Chase or Cooper Kupp or Davante Adams this year. And that's why that group is in my top tier. And then I have a tier break because I believe that, this next group, while I don't think they're going to finish in the top 4, I have the next tiers between, 5 and 9. And I think that any one of these guys, these 5 guys, could finish in that 5 to 9 range. And that's where I kind of see them. So I have, in this order, I have Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans, and Tyreek Hill. So that's my tier break there. That if I am needing wide receiver help and I start to see some of these names fly off, then I'm going to start looking. But if all 5 of these guys are gone, I might look somewhere else because I have a tier break there again. My next tier break is another 5 guys with Keenan Allen, Michael Pittman Jr., A.J. Brown, T. Higgins, and DJ Moore. That's my next tier break. Anywhere between 10 and 14, and this is where it gets really difficult. And you guys, you guys all know it gets really difficult because there are so many talented receivers in this league. And while I know the guys that I think are the top 9, it does get kind of murky after that. And so you really have to pay attention to where your tier breaks, where your personal tier breaks are. Because then you can get yourself into trouble with runs happening, or you start to see some of these guys that are in the top 9 disappear. Well, you've got another tier break coming. So this is where that tier-based drafting system really helps, keeps you on task as you're going through the draft, and keeps you makes sure that you are in control of what's going on. So that's where I'm at. I don't know. So obviously I have this tier break at 14. I legitimately think that there are 14 guys, and truth be told, this next tier could probably sneak in there too. But I think that there are 14 guys that can finish in wide receiver 1 territory between 1 and 12. And I can't quite put my finger on it, but I feel pretty comfortable with where I'm at picking, those guys, saying that they might be in the top 12.
Yeah, absolutely. So, mine starts out, I think, similar, but it is different, none the same, because while you have 4 guys in your first tier and then you go 5 through 9, I have my top 9 split out into 3 different tiers. For me, I think it's Jefferson, Kupp, and then the rest of the league as far as fantasy production this year, right? I agree with Alex. I think based off of this new system that we're going to be seeing coming into Minnesota, I like Justin Jefferson to be the number 1 wide receiver this year. I think Cooper Kupp does see some regression. Maybe it's the Matt Stafford elbow. But there are going to be some things that are just different about this team. They're not going to be able to run it back completely. That's just really, really difficult to do. So, but I do have him top 2. So basically, I think those are the 2 guys who can finish number 1 overall, right, as you're looking at tiers. And then I go down, and then I have Adams, Chase, and Diggs at 3, 4, and 5. I think all these guys in themselves have the ability to finish somewhere in the top 5, right? Could one of them squeak up to 2? Yeah, that's possible. One of them could squeak up to 2. But I think based off these guys' offensive philosophy, where things are going, target shares, strength of schedule, all these things, I think these guys kind of round out the top 5 as far as if you're going for a premium wide receiver, that's where you're going. The next tier, I have Deebo, CeeDee Lamb, Mike Evans, and A.J. Brown. Each one of these guys is in this tier for a different reason. But they all make up this tier. I see all these guys finishing inside the top 10, but it's going to be for different reasons. Deebo Samuel is in there because of until San Francisco shows us they're not going to have him run the football, Debo still plays running back a lot. And it just was 8 touchdowns on the ground last year, if I'm not mistaken, guys. So huge upside for wide receiver to get all these PPR points, but then you're also, I say stealing, but you're gaining an extra 700 yards on the ground and, 5+ touchdowns just rushing the football. So even with Trey Lance being at the helm there in San Francisco, I think that's still very plausible for Debo. CeeDee Lamb, I think it's going to be sheer volume, just based off the fact that the Cowboys don't really have a whole lot of weapons in the passing game, with Gallup going down, Amari Cooper moving on, and a bunch of rookies kind of behind CeeDee Lamb. So volume is the reason CeeDee Lamb is in this tier. Mike Evans, touchdowns. Right? Mike Evans gets lots of touchdowns. If anything is seemingly guaranteed in fantasy football, it's Mike Evans is going to find a way to have 1,100 yards and 8+ touchdowns. And that's good enough to get you inside the top 10 in a lot of different cases, especially in this half-point PPR format that we're showing you here. And then A.J. Brown. I have recently moved A.J. Brown up into this tier. For the longest time, I had him a tier or two below this, but the more I'm following the Philadelphia Eagles and I'm kind of listening to what a variety of people speculate, right? And kind of looking into the reports, seeing what beat writers have to say, listening to the coach speak a little bit, but then, doing my own fact finding. This guy's going to have a ton of opportunities. Right? Like the Jalen Hurts is looking better based off of all accounts, both local and national media. So I think that translates well for A.J. Brown. He is kind of that true alpha there, and his ability to break tackles and, get those yak yards, right? All that extra bonus yardage that comes with it, I think kind of cements him up there. After that, I kind of fall into this group of guys who could finish inside a wide receiver 1 territory, right? Keenan Allen, Tyreek Hill, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, DJ Moore, and Cortland Sutton. I like all these guys as a possible top 12 play. So kind of a bigger tier, if you will, but I have it in there nonetheless. And, these rankings compared to ADP, it kind of gives you the ability to pick a guy and maybe you wait a little bit longer, right? Like if you subscribe to this for Cortland Sutton, right? Cortland Sutton's going a round and a half later than most of these guys. Based off of ADP, he's kind of in a tier with Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, the ADP wise. But because I think he's going to finish up in this tier, when we approach that, this is where I start that run, right? Like I feel like I'm going to grab the best guy in that ADP class because I have him kind of a tier above everybody else. And then after that, we kind of get into guys, and I think I slacked on this one, guys. I didn't mean to stop shading things in, but we do kind of have a list here. Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin, Cooks, Waddle, Metcalf, and then I have Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney. And then right below Mooney, I think I have Amon-Ra St. Brown. So again, another big tier, but these are all guys I fully expect to finish inside of wide receiver 2 territory, right? They have a ceiling of high-end wide receiver 2, possibly towards the bottom end of wide receiver 2, but still, if you're building a lineup, these are guys that I want as a second, possibly third receiver on my team based off of how the draft is shaking out my way. And I feel very confident in most drafts that I will be able to come away with, at least 2, if not 3 of these top 24, 25, 26 guys here on my wide receiver rankings.
I like it. I've got, mine I've got them where very short tiers when I was going through this. And part of the reason for that is I saw kind of, so when I do this, I project things out, and I basically project it based on the fantasy points that I see them ultimately getting. And then kind of, you'll find statistical kind of groupings that happen doing it that way. So for me, I saw a very close cluster between Cooper Kupp, Jamar Jefferson, and Jamar Chase. Those three guys separated out. I see it by about 9 total fantasy points this year. I don't see a huge outlier like Cooper Kupp was last year in this one. And then a pretty good break between Davante Adams and Stephon Diggs there, where they kind of stand alone there. And then again, another big break when we start moving into Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, and then, kind of ultimately rounding out my top 12, DJ Moore, CeeDee Lamb, Chris Godwin, and Brandon Cooks there. So again, kind of just some clusters that form there. And some of these clusters I had to really get in and almost nitpick a little bit, because when I get in from my wide receiver 13 to my wide receiver 24, season long, I see about 17 points total separating number 13 from number 24. So when you average that out, that is 1 point per game or less in these things. So realistically, I could make this thing a giant tier, just simply based on the standpoint that I'm going to see less than 1 point per game differential there. But again, went through and got a little nitpicky on this one. And my next tier would be, at 13, Mike Williams, Michael Pittman, Amon-Ra, Rashad Bateman, and Jalen Waddle, kind of rounding out that next tier. And then going into Marquise Brown, Amari Cooper, Adam Thielen, Debo, A.J. Brown, Allen Lazard, Michael Thomas, kind of rounding up my top 24. And that tier actually goes a little bit deeper for me. It goes, down to Cortland Sutton, who then, kind of at the 25th, which, ultimately kind of creates another tier break in there. Realistically, I've got less than half a point separating Michael Thomas and Cortland Sutton when it's all said and done, as far as a fantasy finish on the way I have these guys kind of projected right now. And there might be some tweaking that still happens here, but I'm starting to feel pretty good about how these rankings are kind of set up and how these tiers are kind of set up here, and definitely kind of like some of these groupings here and where you can find value. So one of the other things too is if that, right, like kind of going back to that tier based thing, right? So in some of my tiers, I've got guys up there that are going rounds later than some of these other ones, just how I kind of see that happening there. And so when it comes through and you're going to be drafting on that one, and that you can get a guy in this tier a round or two later than that run that's going on, you can wait, sit back and take him the next round there, and you can pivot and move towards another tier that's either at the end of the tier or kind of the middle of that tier, gain the value there that so you're not having to push or reach at all, kind of going through your draft there. And that's one of the other things that I find to certainly help that out considerably there as well. There was one that really kind of stood out for me when I was going through this, like Rashad Bateman, Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Like they are going drastically different than either Mike Williams or Michael Pittman on that one. Realistically, I don't see much of a difference from a fantasy finish from those four guys when it's all said and done, but I can wait a round or two, some cases 3 rounds later on some of those guys and really kind of fill in the value on that one. Or if I'm needing to push and I'm needing to make up on some of these things because I went wide receiver, or if I went running back heavy and now I'm sitting there and I'm having to make up my and I'm playing in like a wide receiver starting 3 wide receiver league, and I've got to push to make those up, I can fill in with some of those guys from that tier and gain some value back that way as well. Cool. Any other thoughts on wide receiver tiers? What questions do we have? Because I know we've certainly got some different ones here. So
can we look at our consensus, our overalls here? Because we didn't touch on those. I mean, it looks like we're pretty spot on, but I do think that we have a few differences there. And obviously,
real quick. We're going to get them. We're going to get them so they're just lined up here. Missed that part of that one. And
that's okay.
There we go.
I didn't go all the way down. I think I only did to 36, if I'm not mistaken. But we can talk about our top 12 consensus that we have there, and obviously, we Justin Jefferson obviously is our consensus number 1. Derek, you have him too because you think Cooper Kupp's going to repeat. Very, very likely. In my opinion, I think it's more unlikely, and I think that other guys will fill in, but. We've got Jefferson, Kupp, Chase, Adams, and Diggs as our top 5. And I don't think we would get any argument from anybody about that. We've got a tie there with CeeDee Lamb. And Kevin, what you said earlier about CeeDee Lamb is kind of what I'm thinking too. There's just nobody else to throw to. So, he becomes the winner in a game that nobody wants to play. And that to me is it's Dalton Schultz or CeeDee Lamb for Dak Prescott to throw to, that's realistically what it looks like to start this season. I think other guys will emerge eventually, but that's why I have CeeDee Lamb as high as I do. Derek, you're a little less bullish on him, having him ranked 10th, but so we have a tie there at 6th with CeeDee Lamb and Mike Evans. And again, I think that those touchdowns will be predominant there. And then we have Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, Debo at 10, DJ Moore at 11, and Michael Pittman Jr. at 12. So those are what we think would be wide receiver 1 based on consensus rankings. Obviously, as we just got done saying, I don't think that, anybody says that this is set in stone, because there are guys outside of the top 12 that we have in tiers that are different, in our tier breakdowns there. So what do we think about our consensus rankings here for these wideouts?
I think it follows a lot of what we've been saying, right? Like, there's definitely some unknowns, how well DJ Moore and Baker Mayfield truly come together. Now, reports have been that the two have been dynamic in practice and doing 7-on-7s and some full team scrimmaging. So, I'd like to see more of it. I'd like to see it, kind of play out in a game. Hopefully here come week 3, they get some time together and we truly get to see that. But, that's a good thing, because I know the three of us have been big supporters of DJ Moore. And last year it was kind of for him finishing, I think wide receiver. I think he did finish as wide receiver 14, I believe. But it was kind of a ho-hum finish, right? Like, he started off really hot, then he got slow, and then at the end he kind of picked up a little bit again. So, it'll be interesting to see what him and Baker do. I think really the very interesting part about the wide receiver rankings in general, and Derek and I were talking about this pre-show a little bit, is the basically wide receiver 23 through wide receiver 36, right? That end of tier 2 to the end of tier 3, or excuse me, that wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 3. There is not much separation. Like, Derek's right, nitpicking. It is hard to really sort some of these guys out. And if you're drafting, that's a good thing, right? Because you feel like you're getting comparable value. There's not a substantial drop off. A lot of these guys, the floor is not as safe. And that's kind of why you're sliding down the rankings a little bit, as opposed to not being up here in the top 15 or top 20. But they're still really, really good players, guys. Like, Darnell Mooney is a guy that I know we kind of touched on briefly, right? He could finish as wide receiver 13 or 14 just based off of target share, right? Just the amount of balls that he is going to see thrown his way off of volume, it is possible for him to finish up that high. Now, it's also just as likely that defenses adjust well, and they're going to make Justin Fields do a lot of things that he's not comfortable with going into his second year, and Mooney's production will suffer because he doesn't have anybody around him to take that pressure off, right? Same type of deal that we were just talking about with CeeDee Lamb. If I told you at the end of the year CeeDee Lamb had a 26.5% target share, regardless of his statistical output, would that surprise anybody? And that's a big, big number, guys. Like, if you can get north of 21%, you're loving what you get. And you're talking 26.5%, which I think is well within the realm of possibilities for him in Dallas this year for the same thing as Mooney. I also think that Brandon Cooks could see a monster target share this year. If, with him being able to stay healthy, Davis Mills taking his second year in stride here. So there's a lot of interesting things that, even if you're not completely agreeing with whether it's the consensus or each one of our individual rankings, it gives you the ability to chase the ceiling on some of these guys, because there are players in this wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 area that they do have a clear path to targets, and you can talk yourself into the probability of them finishing well above their ADP or potential tier ranking at the beginning if you're going to do tier rankings.
Not to belabor a point, but Derek, you are drastically different on some of your selections than what Kevin and I have come up with. Namely, and I'll just go with the one that sticks out the most, Deebo Samuel. I've got him as 7. Kevin has him as 6. You have him as 21.
I do. Several reasons, right? One, I'm a believer that the contract holdout, all of the disagreements that Deebo and the Niners front office and coaching staff seem to have had over the offseason. Well, it sounds like they've patched that up and all that. I firmly believe that a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's going to see a decrease in running the ball. So realistically, like when I'm statting him out, I am statting him out purely based on wide receiving output here on this one. So, and when I see it, I see Deebo is about an 83 reception, 126 targets for about 1,100 yards and about 5-6 touchdowns through the air, which puts him in like the 24% target share range for a young Trey Lance coming in there. And that being the case, like I don't see the Niners offense necessarily, moving the ball through the air a ton this year. I also don't see Trey Lance, I think, is going to get somewhere around, 36 to 3,700 yards through the air. I think that's a pretty healthy number for him. And while I think Deebo occupies a ton of that volume, I just don't know that there's enough volume to necessarily go around. Again, you've got the very crowded Niners backfield that is a headache most of the time trying to figure out which Niners running back that Shanahan is going to actually start and give some run to. So I'm not necessarily going to bank on that one, and I didn't bank on that when doing these rankings. I was looking at it simply from a receiving output, and I think he will see more of a receiving role than a combo or an offensive weapon type of role in that offense. I think that they will kind of rock and roll with their four-headed monster that they've kind of got, that nebulous situation they've got in the running back room there. So that's kind of why, right? Like I think that Deebo will have a good year. I think he'll have a good statistical output, but I think that his statistical output puts him down there closer to 20 than it does necessarily up there in the single digits.
Fair enough.
Right on. Anything else on wide receivers, guys?
I'm good.
We're good.
Right on.
All righty. Right. Well, guys, we're going to go ahead and hit we're going to go ahead and take a look at, we had Will on last week talking about Flex Fantasy and some of the really cool stuff that they've got going on over there. We've got some cool stuff going on with them as well. Check the link. It's down in the description on the YouTube channel. Go ahead and sign up. You can help the boys out that way as well. But let's go ahead and take a look at something that they've got here. Well, that's fun.
That is fun. I like that, man. That is a fun little commercial there for our friends and partners over at Flex Fantasy. So as we've been alluding to, Will was on last week. We get the pleasure and the opportunity to partner with Flex Fantasy heading into this 2022 NFL season. And, they have they're reinventing the way to play fantasy football with your friends, right? And so Flex Fantasy gives you the opportunity to upload your fantasy football roster from any number of teams across Sleeper and Yahoo platforms currently, and to where you can go head to head with your buddies, even if you're in different leagues, right? We do some leagues together, we do some leagues apart. Same thing with friends at the office, right? You're talking trash about each other's roster and everything else. Well, now you have a home. You have a home to be able to bring them together and really kind of just settle it. So you upload your rosters. You guys can get it set in, and then you just take it out and see who does have the better fantasy team. You're able to navigate the screen. You're able to kind of predict and vote on who wins and who doesn't. If you're feeling really confident, you are able to wager, if you so desire, on these teams to win. And so, you can see kind of an overarching fantasy masterpiece, if you will, because it allows you to do so many different things with your current league, maybe a buddy in a different league, put them all together, and you guys can actually run a full fantasy season against each other on Flex Fantasy to see who really stacks out and who would have had the best year. So awesome format. Really happy to be working with these guys in the coming season.
Absolutely. It's going to be a blast. We're also going to be taking place in the tournament of champions, and the boys, we have got to have a better showing this year than we had last year. So that's our goal this year, to bring cash and trophies to ourselves in this one. And absolutely love the fact that you can go through, pick your rosters, pick your lineups, put together a team like that, and on top of everything else, put your money where your mouth is across different formats and different leagues. So a lot of fun. Make sure that you check it out. The link is in the description if you guys are wanting to sign up and play. It will help the boys out here through that link there as well. So down on the YouTube, check it out. Awesome. Well, guys, any other thoughts here on Flex Fantasy?
No, more to come, obviously, right? We'll get into it. Weeks to come, we'll start navigating their website with y'all. We'll show you guys where we're at, where you guys can vote for or against us, where you guys can challenge us in different formats if you think you have a team that can take down one of ours. So we are going to do our part to be ever present and make sure that we are well represented. And so now the challenge is out to y'all to step up and try and come take down the champs.
I like it. I like it a lot. Cool. Are we ready to hit over and talk some running backs?
Yeah, my favorite position in fantasy.
This is Kevin's bread and butter right here.
Yes, sir. All righty. So we'll just kind of start off here with the consensus, then we'll move over into our tiers, right? So we'll just kind of start off with the top 12, and then Alex, if you want to hit us right into your tiers after we talk about the top 12 here. So top 12 consensus, we got Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, DeAndre Swift, Nick Chubb, Javonte Williams, Leonard Fournette, and Aaron Jones rounding out the top 12 for us.
All right, so I have 3 tier breaks in my top 12, making a baker's dozen, top 13. I have 3 tier breaks here. Again, I have the top 4, and the reason really I think it could be a top 1 with Jonathan Taylor. I feel pretty confident in Jonathan Taylor finishing as running back 1 this year, provided he stays healthy and plays the entire season. I have no reason to believe that he wouldn't, but that old pesky CMC is out there, and you never know. Like, the guy is a game changer. So if he can stay healthy for an entire season, and man, would it be fun to watch him play an entire season because he's that good of a football player and that much of a game changer. But I also think that Derrick Henry and Austin Eckler can make a claim to that running back 1 status. So I have the top 4 guys in my top tier. And those are guys that, I wouldn't feel bad drafting as my first pick in any draft. And so those are the 4 that I have. We get to see it real time as Kevin fills out his tiers. This is kind of fun to see the thought process, the master at work. My next tier is between 5 and 9. Again, it's 5 guys: Dalvin Cook, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift, and Aaron Jones. I think any of those guys can finish as high as running back 5, or as low as running back number 9. And then I have another tier break in there where I think Nick Chubb, Javonte Williams, Saquon, that one was tough for me, and Alvin Kamara. They're in that third and final tier, which rounds out my top 13. That's where I am with the running backs. I think I feel pretty good about that. Obviously, I've gone down to 24 as well with the top 2, and my next tier break is 14 to 18, and then 19 to 24 is my final tier. But I think that I feel pretty confident that any of those top 4 guys can finish in that top spot. Any of those next 5 can finish in that 5 to 9 range. And then it's really tough to figure out who's going to be. If I had to pick an odd man out that I don't think would be in running back 1 territory when it's all said and done this year, do you guys have an idea of where I'm going with this?
Saquon Barkley?
Yeah, I actually think it's Saquon. That's because he burned me so bad the last couple of years.
Had you listened to your co-host last year?
I know.
We tried to warn you, and
I talked myself into it. It was a pretty
laughed
good.
so hard during the draft, man. I remember sitting there on my dad's couch, and I laughed so hard.
I decided I'd put my money where my mouth was, and well, I'm not very good with money, so there's that.
All right, so right on. Going into my tiers, I have Taylor, Henry, and Najee, and these are all volume plays, right? Taylor might be the exception of volume plays, but when he's averaging 4.6 yards per carry, it's hard to ignore him. And all the yards after contact that he got last year is just absolutely crazy. So those 3 kind of make up those 3 do, not kind of, but they do make up my top 3. I understand the argument for McCaffrey. I have him in a tier below as the injury risk factor, if you will. So that's kind of the leading determination of not putting him in that top tier. But if he finishes inside the top 3, I'm not going to be surprised. I am just going to be very careful about my spots on when and where I might draft CMC. But the rest of that tier, Dalvin Cook, Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon, I think any one of these guys can knock on the door, right, to finish inside that top 3. I like all these guys a lot. I have many shares of each of them. So that doesn't that none of these guys are I'm scared of, right? If I don't have the wide receiver that I like on the board, it's easy pivot, right, to switch over to running back and, take a Joe Mixon as opposed to a Tyreek Hill, like that type of thing. After that, I have DeAndre Swift, Nick Chubb, and Cam Akers, a couple Georgia boys for me sitting right there back to back. Swift, the play there is for the PPR aspect. And hopefully he's able to stay healthy because he was on a tear at the beginning of last season for our co-host Alex. He did a lot of really, really good stuff for you until he got dinged up there towards that Thanksgiving time frame, right, is when he started missing some time. Nick Chubb, volume play. I think the touchdowns are there. He might be the best runner of the football in the NFL, but he doesn't get a whole lot of passing work. So inside the top 10, yes, absolutely. Inside the top 5, no, it's really hard for Nick Chubb to get there because even without a Kareem Hunt, we've seen that Nick Chubb just does not see that increase in passing work, right? He gets a couple targets a game. Maybe there's one week where you see him get 5 receptions and you go, holy crap, like why don't they do this every week? And then they pivot away and go back to Kareem Hunt or Dearness Johnson or somebody else. So there's that. And then Cam Akers, I would like to see, I think am I the highest on Cam Akers? I am. I am believing the fact that, yes, they're bringing him back slowly. Yes, he's splitting carries with D'Angelo Henderson in camp, or Darrell Henderson, excuse me. I'm thinking, I don't know why I just said D'Angelo, a little basketball reference for y'all. Darrell Henderson. So Cam Akers is there. I really think that we can get back to this workhorse back thing. Sean McVay does like to lean on his guy at running back. So if Cam Akers is able to prove the fact that he can stay healthy and really continue to come back from this Achilles injury, he's going to see a ton of volume. Short passes out of the backfield. Obviously, the Matt Stafford elbow thing is real, so maybe he's not driving the ball down the field as much. So you see some more dump offs to Akers. See a lot of red zone work out of Akers as well. So I like him a lot. Javonte Williams, Leonard Fournette, Aaron Jones, James Conner, and David Montgomery are kind of this next tier that go from the back end of RB1 to the very top end of RB2. A lot of this is situation and timeshare, right? Javonte, 60-40 split, I'm thinking, with Melvin Gordon, something like that. So it all depends on where he's able to find pay dirt, right? If they're taking him out inside the 5-yard line to let Gordon try and plug it up into the end zone, Javonte is going to struggle this year a little bit getting inside that top 12. But if he's able to shake it out and ends up with 7 touchdowns one way or another, I think you can see him finish there. Leonard Fournette, he's a guy who's starting to fall down my boards a little bit because of the offensive line situation in Tampa Bay. This is starting to get real. I am very worried about his ability to bang it up in between the tackles, but if he sees another 68 receptions like he did last year, that'll help. And then James Conner splitting time, Aaron Jones is splitting time. James Conner is going to come back down to earth after the monstrous 14 or 16 touchdowns that he had last year
on the ground and 3 through the air, I think.
Yeah, monstrous season. So I do think that comes back down to earth a little bit, but still a very solid RB2 for you. And David Montgomery, a guy who always seems to get overlooked in Chicago. So that kind of rounds out my top 15. We can see as we go down, Zeke, he'll start strong, fade down the stretch. Gibson, I think I need to reevaluate where I have Antonio Gibson right now. Like, I don't think I'm willing to put him in this tier anymore based off of what we're hearing out of Washington and the Commanders camp. So he's probably going to slide down. That means Saquon, Etienne, Breece Hall, and JK are all moving up. And then you get back into more split back situations, right? Josh Jacobs, are they going to run the wheels off of him? Are they going to throw the ball more? Or are they going to have him split carries to try and keep him healthy? Elijah Mitchell, injury history, and a 4-headed monster, as Derek alluded to. So kind of the quick rundown of why I have all these guys split up. But I feel very, very confident in the overall trajectory of these rankings, maybe with the exception of Antonio Gibson sliding him down and kind of moving some other people up just a spot or two.
I like it. So mine, I've got a weird thing that I very rarely do and I very rarely see, where I've got a guy in, that's not at the top in a tier of his own. So kind of a weird deal there, but Jonathan Taylor, CMC, have them as the tier 1. Joe Mixon in a tier by himself at number 3, right? There was enough of a break between him and both CMC and JT, and him and Austin Eckler and kind of the next group there that, just put him in his own tier there. So kind of a weird one, but it was enough of a break both ways to make that make sense. And then kind of my next tier down, Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, and Dalvin Cook. Moving along into the kind of my 4th tier there, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, Nick Chubb, Leonard Fournette, Alvin Kamara, kind of rounding out kind of that top 12 fringe top running back 1 there. And then kind of right there in the solid RB2 territory, Javonte Williams, Breece Hall, Ezekiel Elliott, Saquon Barkley, David Montgomery, James Conner, and then kind of rounding out the last little bit of the number 2 running backs there, Damian Pierce, Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, Antonio Gibson. I've got him slated at the 24th, but like Kevin just alluded to, I'm keeping a very close eye on that situation there. And there's a good chance that he falls down my board even more so. And a guy like, Miles Sanders, James Cook, potentially move up into that 24th spot, kind of rounding out running back 2 there. So, and the way kind of grouping that up, like obviously JT and CMC are 2 guys that are going to, the work speaks for themselves. And if CMC stays healthy, he's one of the few running backs that can score overall running back 1 on a week without scoring a touchdown. And we saw a lot of these guys kind of step up and separate themselves out. Some of these things is, kind of swinging for the fence and calling the shot a little bit on a guy like a Travis Etienne, right? Like not a lot of folks have him up there as a top 12, much less as a number 7 overall type of finish this year. But I see a lot of checkdowns along the way, and I see him getting a lot of work out there in Jacksonville. Guys, what thoughts do we have when it comes to the tiers on the consensus? What are we thinking here?
Share your stat line for ETN to help people understand why you like him so much this year.
So the majority of it is going to come from receiving work on it, right? Like I don't see a massive share on running the ball, right? I see him with about 180 carries when this thing's all said and done. 838 yards is what I'm seeing on the ground for him, and about 8 rushing touchdowns, right? Like that's nothing really to write home about. That's not a spectacular stat line out there. None of that really kind of jumps off the page there, but he kind of backs his way into that kind of finish, a la an Austin Eckler, Leonard Fournette the last couple of years here. Alvin Kamara, even when it comes to receiving work, right? Like see him with about 67 receptions on 84 targets, about 584 yards through the air, and about 5 touchdowns through the air as well. And that is going to kind of, and that would carry him up and into, that kind of tier and that kind of range as far as a total point output.
I like it. And then another guy who I like on here, Damian Pierce, right? We probably haven't talked about him enough.
No, we haven't.
The amount of run and good publicity he's getting out of Houston and the locals down there right now. So it is not set in stone just yet, but it is hardening, right? The wet concrete is hardening at the moment as far as him being the RB1 for Houston, and it's just a matter of can they put themselves in position enough to utilize the run game in the second half, right? Like I think that's probably where I'm scared the most about Damian Pierce, and it's not him, it's the Texans in general. Like I am weary on how much they're actually going to be running the ball in the fourth quarter, because I just see so many games where they're going to be trailing and they're just going to be trying to chuck it back to get back into games.
I actually got him to the 20th overall ranking with less than 200 carries this year.
More passing work, huh?
Yeah. So
56 receptions.
Yeah, 54 is what I have him charted down for, and about 423 yards, 2 touchdowns through the air, right? So you're right. Like I that was one of the things that concerned me and worried me about that one as well. I think Damian Pierce, if he doesn't earn running back one by week 1, it will happen within the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season on that one. So I'm not very concerned on that one. But I see him with about 192 carries, 823 yards, and about 6 touchdowns on the ground there. But where I think a lot of that's going to come to play is I do see the Texans trailing in games a lot. And there's only so many places for Davis Mills to go with the ball, right? Like when we were breaking down this team, the tight end room, we all said hard pass, no thank you on that one. Brandon Cooks is an interesting option there. Nico Collins is an interesting option. But other than that, there's not really a solid wide receiver 3 out there for this team, especially with John Mechie dealing with what he's dealing with. And so that leads into, right, like where's it going to come down when Brandon Cooks isn't open, or a linebacker blitz comes through and Davis Mills has got to dump the ball down and get rid of it. I think that those will end up with Damian Pierce here, and I think you'll see him get enough runway in order to get up there on a somewhere in the 50+ reception range.
I don't want to call myself out here, but I feel like we need to talk about it. My number 17 back.
Cordero Patterson. All right.
Yeah.
Speaking of which,
the reason, yeah, I know.
Cordero Patterson is the most watched YouTube video we've got this season on the player breakdowns on the YouTube channel.
And I think the reason why is because he's very confusing to figure out, because last year Atlanta used him in a way that I think a lot of teams had, especially Minnesota when they drafted him, in a way that I think they would have liked to have used him, but they could never figure out how to do it. Same with his stops in Oakland, New England, Chicago. Atlanta finally did what I think they needed to be doing when he came out of, what was that, Florida that he came out of, right? Tennessee. Sorry, excuse me. When he came out of Tennessee. I just look, he's been a receiver for so long in this league that we know that he can catch the football, right? And so Atlanta last year elected to use him as a running back, and he got some play that way. I don't see any reason why that should change. Now I understand that, obviously it's not Matt Ryan that's playing quarterback there. It's Marcus Mariota, and Kyle Pitts is another year in. But realistically, outside of Kyle Pitts, who's Marcus Mariota really got to throw the football to? So I still think that, while he is a, quote unquote gadget player, I do think that Cordero Patterson will get a lot of use, and you get the bonus of him being a running back. So you get that opportunity of getting those rushing points. You also get the bonus of the fact that he can catch the football, because he's been a wide receiver in this league for long enough that catching the football is not anything foreign to him. So I like Cordero Patterson. He's one of those guys that, if things hold like they did last year, and I have no reason to believe that they would be any different. Granted, there is a new quarterback in town. I still think that Cordero Patterson is one of the guys that I hope, because he's somebody that I'm targeting in a late round to try and gain a positional advantage. I hope that it pans out, because, man, that rushing work and that receiving work and you combine all the touchdowns that he got last year. He had 6 on the ground and another 5 through the air. 11 touchdowns is nothing to, total touchdowns. That's pretty good work right there. So I think that you can get Cordero Patterson on the cheap, but I think your return on investment would be pretty darn good.
Yeah, so I have a bone to pick with ESPN and Sleeper and Yahoo in general. And this is the problem that I have with football specifically when you get with guys like Cordero Patterson and even Deebo Samuel.
Taysom
Hill, right? So if you look at how these same apps treat fantasy baseball, right? Like, if they play 10% of the games at a different position. So if you have a outfielder who also plays first base, or a catcher who also plays first base, or something like that, and they play 10% of the games that they play at a position, they are then labeled as a dual position athlete for fantasy purposes. We don't have a whole lot of it in the NFL, but Deebo should be classified as a running back or a wide receiver based off of what he did last year. And Cordero Patterson got his wide receiver tag taken away. He is now just listed as a running back. Now, earlier in draft season, Cordero Patterson was listed as both. Sleeper took it away about 6 weeks ago. But my bone to pick is, what the hell? Like, let them be dual position athletes. Like, they obviously fill that role for the team and what they're doing in real life. Why is that not good enough for fantasy? And if you're getting into redraft season, whether it's dynasty startups or whether it's redraft leagues, I don't care which, why do you have it for the first half of leagues? You draft a guy at times because you can swing his position. Derek, one of the leagues that we did together, right? That was one of our deciding factors of why we took Patterson when we did.
Mm-hmm.
It was later in the draft. It was, it's not that we're losing our mind on this necessarily, but it was something that we put thought into, right? Of being able to play him in one position or the other, because it helps with roster flexibility, right? And kind of your draft strategy of how you're building things. If you have a Swiss Army knife, being able to play wide receiver or running back in this instance, it helps with bye week coverage. It helps with it helps to absorb injuries. It helps to just kind of format your way. Like if you're super heavy in one position, you can play him in the other if you like his matchup. It gave you so much flexibility, and they're taking it away. So shame on you, fantasy platforms, and I'm just going to make it a blanket statement. These guys should be dual position fantasy players because of what they actually do on the field instead of just making it easy for you writing the algorithm in fantasy football.
I agree with that. I mean, shoot, I tried to pull a fast one on a lot of people when I had Taysom Hill when he was starting at quarterback in my tight end spot because he was listed as a tight end as well. And I tried, it didn't work out for me, but I tried to pull a fast one on everybody. And I remember there was a big to-do about that of all the fantasy platforms having to, well, no, he's a quarterback. Well, no, he's also a tight end. And it's like, look, the guy is on the field. And so I should be able to play him, in my fantasy lineup. Kevin, I agree with you. I'm with you. They need to have that dual designation. I think it's easier in other sports because the sample size is a heck of a lot bigger than it is with football when there is 17 games versus 162 in baseball.
But you could do it snaps played.
NBA. I agree.
You don't have to do it games played for football, right? You could do it snaps played. If you're on the field for 50 snaps, right? If you're playing at least 10% of those at a different position, why aren't you dual position? Even if it's 20%, right? If he's on the field for 50 snaps and 10 of them he's lined up as a running back and the other 40 he's lined up as a wide receiver, it's blasphemy. It's
I'm telling you,
craziness
fire up the typewriter, get right to your Congress member.
I think we know a guy or two over at Sleeper that we could probably reach out to and ask, hey, what the hell's going on?
But back to my original point, I think Cordero Patterson, it's an attractive play for me. I hope that, it comes to fruition because I feel like that is one of those sleeper candidates, even though he's not really a sleeper because he had a really good year last year. But that's one of those guys that you can get on a discount that your return on investment should be a lot higher than where you drafted him. That's why I have him at 17.
I like it. Cool. Well, guys, any final thoughts here on the wide receivers or the running backs or final thoughts in general?
No, obviously we're going to keep updating these rankings. We got one more week of preseason football to go. We've still been very lucky as far as no major injuries coming across fantasy relevant players. But that being said, you guys need to be paying attention to offensive line injuries as well, kind of like what we've alluded to in Tampa Bay. Like if you're losing centers and guards, it's going to be a lot harder for the running back on that team as they try to reestablish the cohesion along the offensive line. If you're losing tackles, it does make it harder on the quarterback because if those guys can get off the edge, they're going to be seeing less time, right? They're going to have to get the ball out of their hands sooner. So it's going to change the target distribution and kind of the routes run and some of the offensive philosophies. So all of it is relevant, guys. It's not just, sitting here having something to talk about and trying to make ourselves sound smart. It does have fantasy implications. So you just need to be paying attention to it. And one of the best ways to do that is to follow us. We are more than happy to help you along your fantasy football drafting journey as you kick off the season, getting ready for some cash and trophies.
Hey, there was some big NFL media news that came out. I don't know if you guys heard it. We all know that Amazon got the Thursday night game for the next 11 years. But Amazon signed that huge deal, which left a lot of people wondering, am I still going to be able to watch the game at my local watering hole? Since it's a streaming only service and some of these local watering holes don't have streaming capable TVs. Well, there was a deal announced today or this week that DirecTV is going to be able to stream or be able to broadcast those games at those businesses. So if you're not, you can still head down to your local watering hole on Thursday and catch that Thursday night game and watch the insanity that plays out because playing NFL football on a Thursday is both the best and the worst idea at the same time.
Absolutely love it. All right, guys. So that's going to take us down to the end of it. And, it's already been said, but make sure you're hitting up the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Good Old Boys FF. You've got the website, goodoldboysff.com. We'll have lots of good stuff coming through there, rankings posted, tier breaks posted, all of that kind of stuff posted on the website there, so that you can pull it up and you can have the boys helping you with some tier thoughts and some draft rankings there going into your drafts, as well as the fact that on the YouTube channel, we've got a plethora, a buku amount of videos of player profiles, little 2 to 5 minute videos with our thoughts on each player going through there. And, y'all are definitely watching those things, and we appreciate you guys checking that out and going through it. But one of the best ways to support this independent podcast is to go to the YouTube's Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast YouTube channel, click the subscribe button, and we go live every Tuesday night, 11 p.m. Eastern. And coming up here shortly, Kevin and I will start bringing you the Friday night breakdowns of all the games being played in their entirety. A little bit more of a gambling angle, a betting angle on those things there as well. And then we got the Sunday morning shows that we'll be bringing to you again this year, helping you set those last-minute rosters, those last-minute questions coming in. But I think that's going to do it for us. For Kevin and Alex, I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe.